Okay, so this is just going to be a super brief video for the TCA cycle. A few words about this cycle. It's one of the more complex ones that you're going to have, but it's pretty straightforward, but you have to study it a lot. You have to study it intensively. I'm just going to kind of outline a few layers, a few strategies to go about getting all the information. So first and foremost, I'd almost draw this on the same page in about 6 different ways, however many different ways you can think to layer it. I've kind of done them all together here, but for example, what I mean is do one where you just write what's in pink. So you just write pyruvate turns into acetyl-CoA, acetyl-CoA combines with OAA or oxaloacetate to make citrate, citrate isocitrate, and so on and so forth. Just write that out and start memorizing that. Then, beside of that or before that, whatever, just write the first letter. So write P, A, C, I, and just keep going around like that. Dr. Zoe has a fun little acronym for that. I'll leave that to class. So you've broken it down into a way of, you've got the details and you've just got the skeleton of it. And then do it in another way that just has the number of carbons. So I've got that here in blue. That may not seem like a very important question or a very important layer, and there may not be a question that's directly saying how many carbons are in pyruvate. But if you know that there's 3 to 2 to 6, you have a ton of information about these 2 steps with that. So you know if this goes from, if acetyl-CoA has 2 carbons, but citrate has 6, there's got to be some point where we've added 4 carbons. So that's how OAA and acetyl-CoA are combined together from citrate synthase. So it also gives you information in this step here. This is a very involved step. I previously in my education spent like a month on just this step here. It's pyruvate dehydrogenase, or the PDH complex. So there's many things that go on here, but if you know that pyruvate has 3 carbons, because remember back to glycolysis, we start with 6, we break down to pyruvate after splitting it. So we have 2 pyruvates, both have 3 carbons, but acetyl-CoA has 2, so we know that there's a decarboxylation step here. And then it gives you information down here as well when we have 2 more decarboxylation steps. So we go from isocitrate, also has 6 carbons, and then you decarboxylate to alpha-ketoglutarate, now we have 5, and you decarboxylate again, and you have succinyl-CoA. So the decarboxylation steps form carbon dioxide. So what's a byproduct of the TCA cycle? Carbon dioxide. And then the energy release. I would redraw a whole other layer that just kind of has, maybe draw it on top of either the numbers or just the letters so that it doesn't get as messy or as bulky as some of this. And basically just go through and ignore everything I've got written here, but see where you have arrows. Just be able to close your eyes and see, okay, if I'm starting here, I have 2 arrows there down to acetyl-CoA. And then we go around the circle, and then I've got 2 arrows and 2 arrows. That's here and there. And we get over here, 1 arrow, 1 arrow, 1 arrow, that kind of thing. So you understand how many, what all is going on, where it's a lot busier on sort of the right bottom, what is that, 3 to 6 o'clock zone, versus a little more consistent, but a little less busy over here from the 6 to 12 o'clock. So, and then kind of the last idea here is water. Another one of those sort of minor things that could come up. This enzyme, fumarase, uses water. There's an enzyme in glycolysis, enolase, I believe it is, that also uses water. So just keep your mind out for those little, grade breaker questions there that separate the high B from an A, as if you understand these little tidbits like that. So water comes in here with a citrate synthase, as well as fumarase needs water. So that's the bones of the TCA cycle. What's the goal of the TCA cycle? It ends in oxaloacetate. So oxaloacetate is sort of the goal of this first oxidative branch of metabolism as you take glucose from your food or whatever your source is, and you break it down, you oxidize it just a little bit to pyruvate, and then you've still got a ton more oxidation that can come because of NADH, 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 FADH2. So you can still oxidize pyruvate. So then the most oxidized derivative or downstream product of glucose is then going to be oxaloacetate. If you want to bring this back in connection with the shuttle pathways of how to get those transfer molecules or those hydrogens in the cytoplasm into the mitochondria where they can actually be processed, because all this is in the mitochondria. Because we're just popping off all this energy that is right there in the perfect location to go to the electron transport chain and then be actually converted into ATP. So the reason that the OAA is needed out in the cytoplasm is because it's the most oxidized. So it can gain a hydrogen and become reduced, which makes it malate again. So the malate is one of those VIPs that can cross back into the mitochondria, and all malate does is drops off its hydrogen, and now we've got OAA, which can bind to acetyl-CoA to make citrate and keep the cycle going. So last little tidbit here is going to be how much ATP overall. So this is just in red, it's just kind of a reminder. 1 NADH is 3 ATP versus the FAD is going to be 2 ATP. And just a reminder, GTP is, in our terms, the same thing as ATP when you're counting the energy. So if you start from acetyl-CoA, you're going to end up with 12 ATP. But what if the question reads from pyruvate through the TCA cycle? Is it still 12 ATP? 12 just came from the math, I'm just skipping over it. And the answer is no, because if you remember, if you could just get one of those layers that you drew of the 2 arrows up at that top, those 2 arrows that went together, the green and the black, well, we knew that there was a release of energy in that step. So you have to add 3 more. So if you start from pyruvate and through to the TCA cycle, the amount of energy yielded is 15 ATP. Versus starting with acetyl-CoA through the TCA cycle to OAA, your net yield energy is going to be 12.